to use your arms to help build up momentum while you're running. And it all starts when you get out your blocks. So you start in your blocks, and the umpire will say, runners on your marks, set, go. You want to swing your arm back as far as possible to get the strongest swing, which build up your momentum as you accelerate like this. And now once you start your proper arm swing, notice how my arms are at a 90-degree angle, your thumbs are up, and your thumb goes up to your chin. This should be a straight line, and your back swing goes slightly past your hip pocket right here. And you just maintain that form for as long as possible. And what you want to do is keep it like this, because if you extend your arm like this, you get off balance. See? You stay like this to stay straight.
The biceps brachii is a two-headed muscle of the anterior arm located here. The origin is at the coracoid process of the scapula, and the insertion point is the proximal radius. The muscle flexes the elbow and supinates the forearm. The brachialis is located immediately deep to the biceps brachii. The origin is the distal humerus and the insertion point is the proximal ulna. The function of the muscle is that it flexes the elbow. The deltoid muscle is located here and abducts the arm. The flexor carpi radialis is next, and it is located right here. It runs across the forearm diagonally. The origin is the distal humerus, and the insertion points are the second and third metacarpals. The muscle flexes the wrist and abducts the hand. Now for the posterior side of the body. The triceps brachii is the sole large fleshy muscle of the posterior humerus. It has a three-headed origin and is located here. The origin is the glenoid cavity of the scapula, and the insertion point is the olecranon process. The function of the muscle is that it extends the elbow. The next muscle is the extensor carpi radialis, and it is located here. The origin is the lateral humerus. The insertion point is the base of the second and third metacarpals. The function of this muscle is to extend the wrist and abduct the hand. The extensor digitorum is located here. The origin is the distal humerus, and the insertion point is the distal phalanges of the second to fifth fingers. The muscle extends the fingers.
Alright, right here is the temporalis muscle. Right here is the masseter muscle, which is used for the jaw. Up here is the frontalis muscle, and around here is the orbicularis oculi muscle, along with the zygomaticus muscle, and around that is used to open your eyes and to move your eyebrows. Then around here is your orbicularis oris muscle. Alright, right here is your occipitalis muscle. Down here is your sternocleidomastoid, and your trapezius muscles right here, which is used to straighten and move your neck around.
The pectoralis major is a large fan-shaped muscle covering the upper chest, originating from the shoulder girdle, the sternum, and the first 6 ribs. It inserts on the proximal end of the humerus to form the anterior wall of the axilla and acts to adduct and flex the arm. The rectus abdominis is the medial superficial muscle that extends from the pubis to the rib cage, and it is segmented. It originates from the pubis and is inserted into the sternum and coastal cartilages of the ribs 5 to 7. This muscle flexes and rotates the vertebral column, increasing abdominal pressure. The external oblique is the most superficial and lateral muscle originating from the anterior surface of the last 8 ribs. The fibers run down and medially inserted into the iliac crest. It flexes and rotates the vertebral column to increase abdominal pressure. It also aids the muscles of the back to rotate and laterally flex their trunk. The internal oblique, originating from the iliac crest, has fibers that run at angles that underline those of the external obliques, and it is inserted into the costal cartilages of the last 3 ribs. It flexes and rotates the vertebral column, increasing abdominal pressure, and it aids the muscles of the back to rotate laterally and flex the trunk. The transversus abdominis, which originates from the iliac crest and the cartilages of the last 5 to 6 ribs, It is the deepest muscle of the abdominal wall, in which fibers run horizontally, inserted into the pubis, and it works to compress all abdominal contents. The latissimus dorsi are the two large flat muscles that cover the lower back, originating from the lower spine and the ilium, sweeping superiorly to insert into the proximal end of the humerus. It extends and adducts the humerus, and it is important to bringing the arm down during a power stroke. The erector spinae group is a group of prime movers of the back extension. They are the deep composite muscle of three muscle columns, the longissimus, the iliocostalis, and the sphenialis, that span the whole vertebral column to help provide resistance to control bending over at the waist. It is a common source of lower back pain. The quadratus lumborum forms the part of the posterior abdominal wall to flex the spine laterally when working separate and extend the lumbar spine when working together. It originates from the iliac crest and is inserted into the upper lumbar vertebrae.
And now for the hip, thigh, and leg muscles. The iliosa is right here. Its origin is the ilium and lumbar vertebrae. The insertion is the femur, the lesser trochanter, and the primary action is to flex the hip. The next muscle here is the abductor muscles, which are in the thigh, right here. And the origin is at the pelvis, the insertion is the proximal femur, and the primary action is to abduct and medially rotate the thigh. And now for the sartorius, which is right here. The origin is the ilium, and the insertion is the proximal tibia, and the primary action is to flex the thigh. Now for the quadriceps group. The quadriceps group consists of the vastus medialis, the intermedius lateralis, and the rectus femoris. The origin is the vasti and the rectus femoris. The insertion is the tibial tuberosity via the patellar ligament. And the primary action for all of these is to extend the knee, and the rectus femoris also flexes the hip on the thigh. The tibialis anterior is right here, and the origin is the proximal tibia. The insertion is the first cuneiform and first metatarsal of the foot. The primary action is that it dorsiflexes and inverts the foot. And the extensor digitorum longus is right over here. And the origin is the proximal tibia and the fibula. The insertion is the distal toes number 2 through 5. The primary action is to extend the toes. The fibularis muscles are right along the side over here. The origin is the fibula, the insertion is the metatarsals of the foot, and the primary action is the plantar flex and invert. Onto the hip, thigh, leg muscles of the posterior side. The gluteus medius is right here. Its origin is the ilium, its insertion is the proximal femur, and its primary action is to abduct the thigh and steady the pelvis during walking. The gluteus maximus is this region right here. The origin is the sacrum and the ilium, the insertion is the proximal femur, and the primary action is to extend the hip when forceful extension is required. The hamstring muscles are located in these areas. It consists of the semitendinosus, which is right here, and the semimembranosus, which is right here, and the biceps femoris, which is right here. The origin of these is the ischial tuberosity, the insertion is the proximal tibia, and the primary action is to flex knee and extend it. The gastrocnemius is right here, and the origin is the distal femur, the insertion is the calcaneus, and the primary action is that the plantar flexes the foot and flexes the knee. The soleus is right here. The origin is the proximal tibia and the fibula. The insertion is the calcaneus, and the primary action is that the plantar flexes the foot.